We are at the Alton VFW Post 1308. It's May 6, 2008. And with us we're going to interview Everett Haegele. And we're with Laura Griffith, who's a reporter with the Alton Telegraph, and Bob Hussman, who is the commander here at the Legion Post. So we'll start off. Where were you on December 7th, 1941?
December 7th, 1941, I was at home listening to the radio on that day, I think, when Roosevelt made his speech.
Okay. How old were you then?
Let's see. About 23. I began enlisted in 24. 24 when I was in the service. So I was about 23.
Okay. When you entered the service, where did you go first? Where did you?
I went to Jefferson Barracks, St. Louis, Missouri, to enlist.
Okay. You enlisted over there then?
Right.
And then you were trained, or?
Then we were sent to Fort Benning, Georgia. That's where we trained for all weapons from 45 automatics to 75 millimeters, and all weaponry.
Okay.
And also trained in the field of combat, training for tanks.
Okay. You were an infantryman then?
Armored infantry.
Okay. When were you sent overseas?
I was sent overseas, and actually we left June the 7th on the Queen Mary.
Okay.
So and we came from Camp Shanks to New York, boarded the Queen Mary, and then disembarked on the 7th. We loaded on the 6th and the Queen Mary.
Okay.
And then we went to, after we left the port there, we went to England. That was on that there. And from there we went to Scotland. It was actually the 1st of Clyde in Scotland, where we disembarked on the Queen Mary. And do you want to go right on through kind of a little bit what we did from there? That's what I'm trying to get.
Yeah, to take you over into combat.
Yeah, okay. Then after we got there and disembarked there, we went to Tidworth. Now, as we went to Tidworth, that's in England, and we stayed in the barracks there for 2 months. After that, we received equipment, and then we were left there on August the 7th to go to the ports of Hampton and Portsmouth. And there we boarded the Liberty ship to go to Omaha Beach. That's where we landed on the 10th. We moved inland from there to 5 miles after we disembarked to an area so that the 7th and the 48th Infantry will come in and have a combat area, an area where they could assemble to move out, assembly area. Mm-hmm. And then we took and went from there to into combat. We left that area at 6:30 p.m. the following day after we landed there, and moved into what was known as Alvaranches at the time. A breakthrough was made, and when they did that, after making a breakthrough, then we made contact with the enemy. Making contact with the enemy, we took and then received shelling, and the lieutenant that was with me selected myself and 5 others to move out to the front to see what was going on And when the barrage hit, why, he had us taken, hit the ground, and the second barrage came in, and of course he was killed. So we held up there, then the 7th moved into the town, took the town, withdrew for the night, and then in the morning, we took the, I was in with the, deal with the anti-tank gun. And when we took the anti-tank gun out of action, after shelling the area that where steeples and things like this here were, and the observers were, we tried to take them out so they couldn't take and use it as spotters and shell us. When we moved into the town, after we made the attack, we took the tank gun out, and all the fellows loaded up. We moved into town, shelling the tanks, moving in and destroying everything. We took and fired over the sides and wiped out all the infantry and things like that, or anybody who was trying to escape, put them in an area, and then they took them, assembled them, and then took them back to interrogate them and took them as prisoners. After we got that done, we also took and moved out towards, actually it was Chartres. And when we hit Chartres, we actually took units of Germans that was in the town and trapped them and shelled them for 48 hours. Now, my unit I was in, we traveled north after shelling them for 48 hours, and then another company moved in, C Company moved in to take the town. We then took and moved to towards the Seine River. Now there, even though I was in combat as an anti-tank unit, in this case, I was made an infantryman. So then I took 9 others and myself, took the canoe, moved out, and on the crossing the river, we had artillery lay a barrage, a 15-minute barrage on the shoreline. And it was just something to see. We loaded our boat and moved out, and then we got near the shore, they started shelling us. But we moved up the embankment, and then I had about 150 yards to move across an open field. When we did this here, and I was in the first wave, so the second wave, when they came through, they had a machine gun to our back. And when they did that, the second wave wiped out that machine gun. But in my front, there was a fence. So I had ready to run and jump over the fence with a machine gun firing off to my right. So I rolled into a ditch, crawled around on the ditch to within throwing distance of the machine gun. So I took a couple hand grenades, tossed them in there, and it became quiet, so we moved forward about 500 yards. When we dug in for the night, after we moved in, and then we had to take and make an attack towards Shadow Theory. Now when we moved out on that, we took and hit a major battle took place there because there was a complete supply route. On the supply route, they had a big column moving out. And of course, had the infantry around the place, so we started shelling and moving in. We had part of our unit in the front and part of the unit in the back. We trapped them and wiped out the whole entire unit. And in doing so, we took and wiped out the entire group of soldiers that was there, the infantry. So when we moved into the city, there wasn't too much, actually too much force to counteract our force. After taking the city and searching around, then we moved out towards Metz. No, Verdun. We moved towards Verdun. And then moving out towards Verdun, there again we had terrific combat because Verdun was a big city. And we had the Moselle River there, and we had to cross it. But it so happened that we got the luck of a Frenchman that took and ran across the bridge, and deactivated the charges by pulling the wires out from the dynamite. And he got a Silver Star for that, but he saved us a river crossing. But we found it, I mean, it's hard to explain how it is that the firepower that we had, and when we laid it on, it was just something to behold. And then we moved to the city, and it so happened that the picture on my book there was taken by reporters that came to the city because we were one of the first in the city. And
your outfit was in the vanguard then, right?
we were spearheaded for the Patton Third Army.
Okay.
That's the reason why, from the time that we entered combat to the time I got captured, we were under fire every day on that. So we took when we took Verdun, well, we're getting close to what was known as World War II. I mean World War One. Mm-hmm. And that's what here was taken. Mm-hmm. The World War One monument was taken. I think it was taken. But we were running out of gas, so there we moved into the town, took it over, and stayed there for several nights. And of course, the Germans came and bombed us. After about 3 nights, we moved out into the area where you could actually see in that book where there was bombs and things like this are still left there, and helmets from World War I, and you can see that in the book. So we stayed there, and after we got the gas supplemented, well, then we moved out towards Metz. And we traveled all the way to there, but in the meantime, while we were moving at such a rate that the Germans couldn't establish a good resistance. Mm-hmm. And good positions. So we traveled 600 miles in about, I guess, 12 days or something like that there, and took 150 towns. So you get an idea how fast we were moving. And when we hit Metz, it started raining and things like this here, and it was really quite an experience to see us, because our Air Force was grounded practically. And when we moved out towards the Maginot Line, there was about 150 yards in front of them that we were going, and we couldn't make much headway there. So we were taken full back, and then our next mission was to take and go up to a place where we were supposed to relieve C Company and move ahead of them. And in doing that, we would become the unit to take and make the attack on the next town. And in doing so, we moved out and made the attack, and when then and we had to take and cross a bridge, and it's all on foot now and moving out. And when we took and crossed the bridge and that in the shell fire, we waited there till our tanks and artillery and everything got set up, and the tanks crossed the bridge, and then we moved out because we were in front of C Company to make the attack. And we took and made this attack. We were called what was Suicide Hill. We didn't recall that because it had such a way of Germans zeroing in on these fields, and also on the places where you would take an anti-tank gun on the crossroads and put it there. So when we crossed this, it was really tough going. But when you saw what they did to the Germans when we crossed this field, the whole field was littered with Germans. I guess there was 400 or 500 Germans there in the trenches and things like this here.
Mm-hmm.
In our artillery, we had what was known as an air burst. And when it come down, when it went off, it sprayed shrapnel all over. So these guys, even in their trenches, they were just cut to pieces, and they're laying there black and blue and arms and things like this. Pretty rough to describe. But anyway, we crossed that, and we moved into the town, but it got pretty rough, so we pulled out to go to this field to make an attack. But Jerry had this field so well zeroed in and the attack so hot that we withdrew, and we went down a little canal that was filled with water. It was raining real bad, and crawled and went back to this town, and then we spent the night there. And it so happened when I went into the town, I saw some grapes, so I reached up and got a few grapes to eat, and a few pears. There was a pear tree there, so I put them in my pocket. And entering the basement of this house, there's a bunch of potatoes, so I got the honor of sleeping on the potatoes. So in the morning when we got up and moved out, on that there, we were head to Harlem, and I think it was the 24th in Harlem. And there we took and we had to go on what is known as a defensive position there. And when we did, it was near the pit fields and what they call pit fields in there. And we had to cover 600 yards. And the C company was 2.5 miles, and A company was 2.5 miles, and we, as the anti-tank units, was 2.5. We had 600 yards that we had to take in between the two companies. So we had C and A company, and we had taken us in the middle, and we guarded that position. So we had to take in a squad and took and had a perimeter set up where we'd take 250s and 230 calibers on the corners of the building. When any attack that was made, then we had the riflemen in between. So anything that came through a patrol, and that's what we would take, and be pretty well protected. And so anything that moved out there, we'd either have flares or something like that to set up and make contact with them. So we had a few attacks, but they weren't too bad because they were mostly reconnaissance attacks, and they're trying to find out exactly what we had. So we moved there, and then later on it got pretty hot. They started moving in and started with patrols, so we brought another unit, so we had this pretty well protected. So when they moved in, we had combat with them and took care of this situation here. Then after we got through with that position, then we had to take and go up to what is known as I'm trying to see the name of that town now. I can't think of it right now, but anyway, Astir, I think it was. Okay. But anyway, the German made a breakthrough at this point, so we had to go in there. Then we were going to be a defensive unit. So the whole unit moved out, A company moved out, set up a line of defense. And it so happened that anti-tank gun was on one side and infantry was on the other. And the tank, and they started moving in. And the tank was coming down the road, and we had an anti-tank gun coming up the road to take care of the situation, but they had us to move. And in moving, then we were out of position, so we couldn't fire. The anti-tank unit fired at this, tried to fire, they couldn't. Their anti-tank gun misfired. It took, on the Tiger tank. They fired one round missed. Second one got them. But we couldn't fire, and it was lucky if we did, with a 57 millimeter against the Tiger tank would have been wiped out. So that's one of the things that happens in combat. After we took that, and this attack coming through, the first sergeant came down with me. I was behind the house and was open fire on the Germans coming through because you could see them coming through with fire behind them. And he showed up to be on by a tree, and I told him to get away from there because putting shell fire on there. And I told him if one of those hit the tree, it could kill him because it acts like shrapnel. So we got that straightened away, and of course he got wounded, and they took him away, and he passed away. Then things settled down, and I went back to where we left this gun. See, the gun was left intact. So I had to go back and took out the firing pin while the Germans were coming in on it. And then I was cut off, so I had to go all the way back to the CP. And when I did that, I made the report what took place, and then I stayed the night with the CP, and then we went back to the front. Now it so happened that with the Germans moving in, the lieutenant in charge decided that we'd pull back about 100 yards. So we did, and then we set up a defense. That so happened then orders came through for us to hold for 48 hours, and that everybody else withdrew. So it was a handful of men against a Panzer division. So when we settled down, everybody knew that was Katie Roy the door because that was it. So we held them up, and they were making their moves to take and find out exactly what we had, reconnaissance. And when they did this here, they found out in a couple of days what we had, so they sent in 5 Tiger tanks and the infantry. It so happened the 5 Tiger tanks was on C Company, and the others was on coming in on our side. The guys on C Company really got hit because the 5 Tiger tanks demolished them. But we fired on the infantry until they got close, and then we tried to withdraw. But in withdrawing, there was a Tiger tank that went on around this. He went into a ditch. When he went into the ditch, it acted as a perfect tank trap. And in doing so, they took and put up the tank where the 88 was coming right down on us. And they had a fellow with a machine gun on one side and a guard on the other with a rifle. Eichhoff joined us, and when we had to cross a field and come down this canal, and when we did, this fella fired at Ike. There's nothing they can explain, but Ike shot him and killed him. Nobody opened up, and they can't figure that out. They really can't. But they had us to surrender because all they had to do was lay an 88 on us. That was basically it. So we took and surrendered, and then we were marched back, and we had to pick up the different fellows. And when we did this here, we had to take blankets because some of them were wounded, and make litters and carry them back. They marched us back to where there was a bridge, and an airplane came over and dropped a couple of bombs and took out a tank. And then they marched us back a little bit, and they photographed us and had us march around and different things like this here for propaganda purposes. And then we went from there to a town named Disburg. I said Disburg, if I remember correctly. And there's where I was interrogated. So this officer, when my turn came, he had me come to the room, he took out his pistol, laid it on the table, and he had me lay everything I had in my pocket on the table. I never had nothing important though to give him. And he says, "What's your name?" So I gave him my name, my material number. And he says, "What outfit was you were bringing up to take and replace you?" "I'm sorry, sir." And he says, "Your name's German." I said, "I can have you sign the papers." He said, "Sign the papers and I'll make it easier for you while you're in here." I said, "No, sir. No, I'm sorry, sir." And he said, "What you so damn sorry about?" I said, "You're a soldier and I think you understand." So he let me go. We moved back and on that, and they took us to Stalag 2B, yeah, and that was near Hanover. And we stayed there a few days. Now, this was just repetition because all they did was move from one Stalag to another. So we went from there to Hammerstein and then Hanover on Stalags. When we got to Hanover, I was selected along with 33 other pilots to take and go on what is known as a commando unit. That's a working unit. Mm-hmm. So we were taken, put on a train. In this case, we were put on coaches. So it wasn't too bad. So we moved out, and they took us to another, what's known as Rostov. Now, when we got there, they had a little, what we call a little green shack, and the guard was in one side and we were on the other. So we went into these units here, and it was, I guess, a room about 30 by 40, and had bunk beds around. So we each had a to sleep in, and it had a little place where it wasn't running water, but a bucket and a table, and another table to eat off of. So that was our living quarters. But the water was polluted, mm-hmm. and everything else. When you put in, take out the honey barrel and move it, we had to take it and dump it and things like that there. And then they got us up after we got there. Without breakfast, we moved out to load 16 boxcars of hay. And that was taken off of a place where they had it stored. And we made a ramp and took the fellows go ahead and dumped it into the car, and the others would stack it. So we did that. And then we worked in these warehouses to take and store, where they stored all kinds of different things like oats and anything that would use for service, like potatoes and things like this here, sugar, mm-hmm. coffee, and things like this here. So we had to stack those up, and we got there, and we had to wheel them and load cars along with it outside of stacking all these things up 6 high when we unload them. And then when we load the cars, we wheel them in on carts. And when we got these carts in there, we ripped open sacks so that it would be hard to unload, and then we'd cover up the sacks. And that was our mission there. So then they had us, we had to take and had a great big contraption, so we had to take hay, and throw it into this machine and make bales of hay. And when we did that, you had what was known as blockers. So when you got the bale so big, you had to put blockers in there and then put wires through there and make up the bale. But you had a big synchronized hammer, and it took this up. And when it came down, it pressed the bales on this here, and then we take them stored. But that was our life there. So. But we worked pretty hard because the sacks weighed 220 pounds. Mm-hmm. And when the electric went off, anything 100, 125, we had to carry up the steps. So and I weighed 180 pounds, and 6 months I weighed 116. Our food was, we get up in the morning and maybe have a part of a loaf of bread, maybe a little marmalade, and a tea or coffee was either herbs or burnt barley. So we had to get up in the night and things like this here. And when you went to bed, you had fleas, straw fleas, and they had to keep the devil out. They had sores on them and things like this here. And, well, we had Christmas, and when we had Christmas, the guys would all go together and took a bare tree, and put little wrappers on it, and then we had Red Cross boxes every once in a while. So we'd take part of our Red Cross box and we'd bribe the guards to get us some beer and cigarettes. We'd take our cigarettes to chew. And they had a few other things that we used to get from anything we needed, I would get from the guards was cigarettes. But that was our Christmas, and we sat around and drank the beer and had songs and did pretty well. But most of them had a pretty good time there. Then after we got through with that, we were taken by, then everything was starting moving. We had taken a situation where the people were coming in because the Russians were moving them, and then our position here was going to be wiped out because they were going to move us. So we had to move from there to Rye. And when we moved to Rye, then we had to take we put in a barn, and up in the loft, we had straw laying all over the floor, and with a little board around it. That was our bed. So we laid in there, and it was cold. It had one little light bulb for the light.
When you're moving, are you moving north?
Yeah, way up north,
Okay.
Along the Baltic. And matter of fact, Rye was right along. Actually, you see the Baltic Sea where we were.
Okay.
And you could see the ships and things like this here. And so when we got there, we had to take and work on digging up trees and things like this here, cutting them down, making firewood for them and putting them in stacks so that they would have something to use. But here again, our food and everything was pretty rough. But when you get the rumors, we got the rumors and everything moving in. And it got so bad that they took civilians and anything we were doing, they were going to put them on. But the planes were coming in now and being strafed and things like this all through the fields. And we moved out to a position where we had to go on a march. When they moved, now some of the fellows also had plans to take and escape, but they figured there was 3 of them that did escape, but later was captured. But we figured if the Russians coming in, it'd be better to wait till they come in and make our break in. So that's what we did when we was marching on this hill, and we were near, I think it's a car camp or something like that. But anyway, we hit this town, and the Russians started coming in and started shelling. And as soon as they started shelling and everything made like no man's land, all the PWs made a break. All left at once. And the guards were frantic because they didn't know what to do, so they didn't bother too much because the Russians was coming in and shelling. So we went to where we were along the railroad track. And we laid there, and we had a Russian with us, and we sent him over to the Russian to explain the situation. So when we were freed, so then we had to take a march all the way back to New Brandenburg and made that situation there. And when we got back to New Brandenburg, then the war ended on May the 1st. And I was put in, lucky, I didn't go to the camp. I went to a hospital where we had a pretty nice setup for a while. And then we moved into a building, and then we moved back by the Russians. The Russians came in and moved us to American lines. And then we settled into where we went to one of the towns offhand. But anyway, we moved back to Lunenburg. And from Lunenburg, we went to Camp Lucky Strike and boarded ship from home. I was put in the hospital for a week, I think several days, and given a quart and a half of $8 a day and vitamin pills. So, and then I got back to the States. I left on the 7th of June and come back on the 7th of June.
Huh.
That's something a year later.
A year later.
Yeah.
When you look back now, do you think, well, I guess one question is, you had gone through so much as you're battle hardened all the way, and then I'm captured. After all this, I'm captured.
No, yeah, but I thought we'd be killed. Because when you have a handful of men, that's what it was. We had a handful of men. We had one anti-tank, anti-tank destroyer. We had two 75 millimeters, and they couldn't. You hit a tank, bounce right off. So we thought we were dead. I mean, we did. But when we got a chance to make a break for it and get out of there, everything worked. I don't know why, but we were lucky. Because why these guys didn't open up on us when they killed a German, I still don't know.
And then just looking back, and did you feel, or when did you start feeling, hey, I was a part of a pretty big deal? I just wasn't on the sideline. I mean, this is historic.
No, we fought through all the major cities of World War I. And we spearheaded the Third Army, so I knew it was a big deal. It was a real big deal.
Yeah.
But you didn't think you were going to come back either. I mean, you can't believe when you walk through a garage that's coming in on you like that, you don't think you're going to make it at times because it's too much. And see, it's not, you didn't get any break. I had one break. When I was in the States, I was lucky enough to win an award for a 3-day pass. And then I was given on this award a chance to be a Navy man get killed. So I had to be a chance to be an honorary guard for him. But when I got overseas, I forgot all about that. But I did get the 3-day pass that somebody picked it up and gave me while we were in the little time here and weren't doing anything. And just 3 days. So I was lucky in that respect.
When you guys were really rolling along, though, did you get tired? I mean, it seems like you're on the go, and then you got to fight. I mean, are you tired?
Well, you just don't think about it. Because you just don't. Yeah, you get tired, and you get muddy, and you're wet, and you sleep in a foxhole, and it's raining. You don't sleep, and you head full guard, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So all these things go into
the only thing that saves you is you're young.
Yeah, because you took and it's hard to explain, but you don't. When we were moving and doing things, you didn't have time to think hardly. You either did what was necessary and took the consequences of it. You don't. I can't tell you really if I got scared or not because I was busy all the time.
That's what it sounds like.
Another, but you thought about it.
Okay.
Every day. I mean, You didn't know whether you're going to be. You're here, and your buddy's here. Next moment he's gone. That's what it is in combat. There's no